everybody. My name is Kevin Marazzi. I'm one of the Sunday school teachers at Union Hill Baptist Church. Brother Bill asked me to bring a devotion to you this evening. And we have been studying about forgiveness in Sunday school. I'm going to take a little bit of a different take on that and talk more about what it is that keeps us sometimes from forgiving others and what gets in the way of the chance to forgive somebody. You know, what causes us not to be able to do that? So let's just jump right in. First, I want to ask you a question to think about on your own. When was the last time you needed to give forgiveness to somebody? Ask them to forgive you for what you've done to them. And or when was the last time someone came to you and asked you to forgive them? Think about how difficult that may have been for you, or it may have been easy, but in most cases, sometimes if someone hurts you deeply, you have a hard time giving that forgiveness. And secondly, I want you to think about what actually gets in the way. And in most cases, unless you're writing a letter to somebody, you're going to speak it. And you're going to tell them that you forgive them. Or you're going to talk to them through that situation. So it comes from the mouth. And that's really what I want to talk about today. How does our mouth, our tongue, our language get us in trouble? So let's jump in. I'm going to read from James chapter 3, verses 1 says, "Not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly." And what I want to talk to you really starts in verse 2. We all stumble in many ways. If anyone is never at fault in his ways, he is a perfect man, able to keep his whole body in check. Number one, we know that none of us are perfect. God is the only perfect. But what he's trying to show us here is that if you can keep your tongue in check and bridled, as some translations may say, that helps you to keep the rest of the body under control. And so in verse 3, when we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. So what are we seeing here? Number one, that your mouth has the power to direct the rest of your life. And think about the things that we stumble through life in. Many of the ways that we might stumble, the issues that come into life, the sins that we may have in our lives. If we can control this little piece of muscle that our whole body, in comparison, it's just, about maybe 3 inches, the tongue? God's saying in verse 3 that even a horse, which is a massive size comparison to the human body, is controlled by a bit. If you've ever ridden on a horse and you have the reins of the horse, you can control that horse, which way it goes, whether it goes left, whether it goes right. You're controlling it from a very small part of its body. And so what God's trying to teach us here is that if we can control that tongue, then we can control the rest of our body, which in turn may control the circumstances and the issues that we run into in life. So just like the horse, the ship is controlled by a small rudder. And, throughout this, it talks about the ship being controlled by the small rudder. If you've ever been on a cruise ship, some of them are the size of cities. And I know when Leslie and I took a cruise with the kids when they were younger, we went to Disney and had a Disney cruise. And as you crossed out in those intercoastal waters, things are calm. Once you cross over into that and the winds start to blow and the waves start to become a little rougher, especially in an October time frame, which is a lot of the hurricane time frame, that ship, no matter how massive it is, those winds can toss it about. And it's the same thing in our life. What are the outside forces of the world that are tossing you about to and fro? What are the things that you're allowing to control you? And that rudder on that ship, in comparison, is such a small thing. And again, it can guide it and move it where it wants to go. So I think what God's trying to show us here is if we're able to control our tongue, we can do that. But we'll read later on that no man can control their tongue, is what God says. We need to give that over to him. And Dr. Tony Evans talked about this, and he calls it dynamite dentures. Have you ever said something where you wish you could just reach out and grab it back? And we all do it. We do it to our kids. We may do it with our spouse, co-workers, where we're thinking something and the thought process comes and we say it and we regret it before it's even across the room. And so I know we've all done that, and what God's saying is, give me your lips, give me your mouth, give me your tongue, and not allow it to be controlled by the devil, but be controlled by God. You will have less issues and confusion and areas of the life that are pushing you to and fro. So we're going to move on. So the first point that I made there was the mouth has the power to direct the rest of the body. If we move on to the next point I want to make is the mouth has the power to destroy life. What do we mean by that? Well, let's read in verses 5 and 6. So in verse 5, we'll pick up here. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil amongst the parts of the body. It can corrupt the whole person, sets the whole course of life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. So what are we talking about here? Have you ever experienced fire and the destruction that it can do in a home, in a forest? In fact, just this past week, I heard that in the panhandle of Florida, they are experiencing wildfires there and trying to get those under control. We've seen fires in California, and fire it's not prejudice. It don't matter if you're rich, poor, whatever. It can be extremely destructive and ruin lives. And we've even seen in California and areas like that where very many famous people last year lost their homes from the devastating fires, thousands and thousands of acres. And no matter what you have, you can't stop that. And so he's using an illustration here of how destructive one little spark can cause thousands and thousands of acres worth of damage to your home and your possessions and life. And it's the same thing with your speech. If you're not allowing God to control what you say, and you allow the devil or the outside world to control your thought process, that one little spark from such a small muscle in the body can cause devastating hurt and pain to others around you. It also keeps you from asking forgiveness and giving forgiveness. And I think one of the reasons that we may have trouble giving forgiveness is pride. We're human beings. We allow pride to get in the way. If someone hurts us deeply, what's our first thought process? It's not, I want to forgive them. It's all about me. And so if we can control that tongue, control our lips, control our mouth, I believe we can control the damage that can be done by that little spark that could occur if we spout off at the mouth. You know, I thought about this. A lot of people say, why did God give you 2 ears and 1 mouth? He wants us to listen more than he wants us to speak. And if we're listening to him, I believe we'll speak what he wants us to speak and not what we want to speak. So that fire can be sparked out of a little spark, and it can be destructive. Why does it feel like then sometimes your life is completely out of control? And I don't have a bicycle to illustrate this, but one of the great illustrations I've seen is that your life is the middle of the hub on a bicycle wheel. And a bicycle wheel has spokes. And maybe when you were a kid, you may have done something crazy like tie sparklers to your spokes and ride down the street and let it sparkle. But if you think about that, it's a great illustration of how our lives get out of control. From one little spark in the middle of that hub, if you allow that spark to reach out to the outside of that wheel, and you may do it in this area of your life, or over here in this area of your life, or this area of your life, next thing you know, it sets aflame the outside wheel, which is the things around us, and now your life is completely out of control. So if you can control that and keep things inside to allow you to control what you're saying to people, and talk through this with God and pray about this before you speak, I believe our lives will stay a little bit more under control. So the last part of this that we will learn is that in your mouth is the power to determine life. You know, in Sunday school, we talk a lot about life and death choices. And what do I mean by that? I believe that if you're making choices for God and for our Lord Jesus Christ, that those are life choices. He wants to bring life into the world, not death and destruction. If you're making choices based on your own feelings or based on what the world tells us, you could be making death choices that takes you down a path that you don't want to be down. And that path could lead further and further away from your walk with Christ. So that's what I mean by that. And what we're seeing here is that as we read further in 7 and 8 and on, all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and creatures of the sea are being tamed and have been tamed by man. But no man, again, can tame his tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. Get that? He's telling us that our own tongue can be full of deadly poison. And what is he saying here? He's saying that when you speak, if you're not allowing that to be tamed and bridled, and he says no man can do that, which means only God can do it. If you're not turning that over to God, then you're allowing that poison to be spread and can be deadly. So with the tongue, in verse 9, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow in the same spring? My brothers, can a fig tree bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. So let's just stop right there and see what God's trying to tell us. He's saying the mouth is one thing that differs from the rest of the things that God created. God created us, man, in his likeness. So what he's saying is you can actually stand in church or wherever you are worshiping, whether it's at home like right now in our living rooms, and you can praise the name of God. You can praise Jesus for what he's done in your life. And 10 minutes later, you could be screaming and yelling and cursing at your children, at your spouse, at people around you. He said the mouth can allow blessings and cursings to come out. But what's he compare it to? He compares it to the fig tree. And I compare it to, like, in today's times, in Florida, a lot of orange trees. What does an orange tree produce? It produces oranges. It don't produce apples. It don't produce olives. It produces orange. God made it to be a producer of oranges, same as the apple tree or any other thing. Birds reproduce. They have birds. They don't have fish. So what he's trying to tell you is that out of the things that he makes, he wants blessings to come. And he wants what is designed for that. And we are designed to be like him. We should be speaking of him and not of the cursings. And so I thought that was really interesting that we actually have the choice to use the power of the mouth to either curse or bless, either give it life or death. So let me read in verse 10. We read verse 10. It's out of the same mouth come praise and cursing, my brothers. This should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water come from the same spring? No. So I just want to point out that why is this happening? Why can the same mouth produce blessings and cursing at the same time? And when God created you, think about what he did. He spoke. This is really interesting. If you think back about in the Bible, when God spoke, big things happened. When God spoke, man was created. When God spoke, the earth was created. When God spoke, he gave Adam a voice. He gave him speech. Think about what the serpent did in the garden. He spoke. He spoke to Adam. The devil is very, very deceitful in his ways, and he is trying to trip up Christians left and right and keep hold of those that are not Christians. And how's he do it? He used what God used to trip Adam up. He spoke to him. And Adam thinks, well, God gave me speech, I can speak. And from there, we had issues, right? So don't be deceived by what the devil can do. When you speak, he wants to utilize that in a negative way. How many times have you been in a conversation, maybe at work, and someone tries to trip you up because they know you're a Christian, or at school, they know you're a Christian, and you may say something, and they're able to take those words and twist those words to make it, oh, wait a minute, but I thought you were a Christian, but you're speaking like this. So our speech, sometimes more than our actions, is extremely, extremely important about how we say things to people, how we speak about different things that we believe in. And so that little 3-inch tongue can just cause such problems. And again, we have a choice. Are you going to speak life into the world? Give forgiveness? What if the healing that we feel and the relationship strength that is built from telling someone, I am sorry, or I do forgive you? That is what God wants. He wants that healing process to occur and to happen. So speak life with your tongue, not death. And what would be the opposite of forgiveness? Bitterness, harmful, punishment, scarring. Those are the types of things when you think about the way you speak to your spouse or to your children. Do you speak to them like you would speak to God, or do you speak to them like you would speak to your enemy? Just think about that. And I want to leave you with one little illustration that I thought was really good that I've heard Dr. Tony Evans use a couple of times. And it was a story about two frogs. And these two frogs were hopping along, and they hopped down into this ditch. And they saw something down there they thought was, better for them down there than it was up here. They hopped down into the ditch. They realized after they get down there, what they saw was not really what they expected. And now they're like, well, we have to get back up to the top. So they hop, and they hop, and they hop, and they start to realize we don't have enough strength to hop out of this ditch. And they continue to hop, and now a bunch of their friends and their family are gathered around the top of this ditch, and they're looking down, and they're just feeling bad for them, and they're realizing there's no way they're coming out of that ditch. And they start yelling down to them and screaming to them, stop, just die a peaceful death. Just go lay down and die, because you're going to use all your energy. You're never going to get out of that ditch. You're not going to have any food. You're not going to be able to sustain and live down there. So you're just going to die. But please stop. You're causing so much pain to yourself. Stop trying to jump out of the ditch. Well, the one frog goes over. He lays down and he dies. And the other frog, though, he continues the jump. Miraculously, he jumps out of the ditch. And they go over to him, and they're just amazed that this frog was able to jump out of that ditch. As he gets out of the ditch and he's walking over to them, they're still screaming at him. And they're like, wow, how did you do that? He said, well, I'm deaf. The only reason I can hear you now is because I can read your lips. When I was down there, I didn't know what you were saying. I didn't realize you were saying, don't jump. Now you're telling me you were saying, don't jump, just die peacefully. He said, I thought you were saying, cheering me on, come on, jump. And that encouragement gave me the encouragement to be able to jump out of the ditch. So are we deaf to what the devil is telling us, and we're hearing what heaven and God is telling us? That's the important thing in this story. And it is what you're speaking and what you're hearing. Is it coming from heaven, or is it coming from the pit of hell? So thank you for taking the time to listen today. Again, hopefully we will be back together in person in the weeks to come. I think at Union Hill we're shooting for having our senior recognition on May 31st in the morning at 11 o'clock. And then that will be remote with the families there. But everyone else would be remote listening online on YouTube or on our Facebook page. And then also June 7th will be our time that we try to gather back at church for the first time. But again, we'll be smart about what we do, and we'll be sending out some more information about how we do that. I think right now the plan is maybe 4 different services, and we'll let you know how we're going to disperse that and have people join us for those. But until then, please reach out to us either on our website, Union Hill Baptist Church. If you'll search that and just Google search Aniana, Alabama, you'll find us very easily. On Facebook. And of course, you can always just call the church office and share any prayer requests that you might have. Until then, I just ask that God would be with you and give your family peace during this time. Thank you.